Live.
Yeah. Hi,
Hey.
everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our event. I'm Christian. I'm one of the booksellers at Astoria Bookshop and also the events coordinator. Uh, Before we begin and introduce our author here today, I just want to say thank you for supporting us through everything going on right now. Like I say every time I'm on screen, um, we really appreciate it, and it's really helpful to us right now, especially given that we're operating very differently from what we normally do. Um, so today we have author Richie Narvaez. He let
Hola.
me give you his bio, and then we can begin to talk about his book, Holly Hernandez and the Death of Disco. So Richie Narvaez is the author of Hipster, Death, Rattle, and Roachkiller and Other Stories, which won the 2013 Spinetingler Award for Best Anthology. His work has appeared in numerous journals and anthologies, including Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine, Latinx Rising, an anthology of science fiction and fantasy, Hit List, the best of Latino mystery, and You Don't Have a Clue, Latino Mystery Stories for Teens. He served as president of the New York chapter of the Mystery Writers of America, artist in residence of the Bronx Council on the Arts, and a judge for the 2019 PEN America's Open Book Awards. He teaches at the Fashion Institute of Technology in Manhattan and lives in the Bronx.
Yes.
So you can
Thank you,
take it away.
Christian. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for putting all this together. Thanks, everybody who's out there. I know that some of you have ordered the book, and there might be some delay, but you will be able to order it through Astoria Bookshop, and they will get it for you as soon as they can. Okay, the book has been printed, and it should be shipping very soon for those of you who want it. So do you want me to read a little bit first, Christian?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
you could read a section of it, and then we can go into our questions that I have for you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to read the premise. The basic premise of the book is that it's 1979, and there's a young woman. She's 14. Her mother is a police detective, and she is very interested in police work and detecting. She has sort of a morbid sense of humor. She is going to an elite high school, which my lawyers have told me is not Brooklyn Technical, to say it's not Brooklyn Technical High School, even though it's very similar to Brooklyn Technical High School. Anyway, she's going to the high school. There's a murder at the school, and this is where we pick up the story. This is chapter 15. Minutes ago, Holly had been in metal shop, concentrating on not breaking her tool bit on a lathe. Then a security guard walked in briskly into the shop, and without even stopping to tell Mr. Feeney why he was there, walked up to Holly and said, "Your mother wants to make sure you're safe." Instantly, she knew what the loud alarms and the warning to stay in class had been for. In the hallway was a police officer she recognized, Wojciechowicz, and she knew she was right. "Hello, Wojo," she said. "What's going on?" "Hey there, Holly, your mom. She just wants to make sure you're safe." "From what?" Wojo led her to another floor, and she could see security and police gathered in front of a teacher's office. He stopped her down the hall from the commotion. "Just wait here," Wojo said. "Your mother will be out in a minute." Holly stood by herself in the hallway, watching the office door, trying to imagine what was happening. Since her mother, a homicide detective, was there, that meant a murder had been committed on school grounds. People were rushing in and out of the office. There was Principal Schnitger in a daze. She clutched her stomach with one hand and covered her mouth with the other. The head of security was there too. Licata was his name, complaining about the mess he would have to clean up. This only intrigued Holly more. She took a step closer to the door. No one paid attention to her. Step by step, before she knew it, she was at the door. People pushed past her, and then she was inside the office. Busy doing their jobs, no one bothered to ask why she was there. At a desk at one end of the room, a body was slumped forward. The nameplate on the desk read, "Mr. Friedman." It was her social studies teacher. Holly looked at the body, focused on it. Then she looked around, concentrating on what was in the office, behind the desk, on the wall. Mr. Friedman had 3 degrees, social studies, English education. There were some trophies, one for bowling, one with a figure of a man and a woman dancing. He loved sports, but baseball in particular, it seemed, the Yankees even more. He had a family, a wife, 3 daughters. Holly, her mother, who had been standing by the desk, grabbed her by the arm and pulled her into the hallway. Wojo, where the hell is Wojo? Wojo ran over. Sorry, Lieutenant. What the hell did I ask you to do? She shouldn't see this kind of stuff. She's just a child. Holly said he was killed from behind by someone he knew. And it doesn't seem like robbery if that's what you're thinking. Holly's mother stopped talking and looked at her. Holly, I'm sorry. I called you out of class in a panic. You shouldn't have seen that. Can I get you some water? Wojo, get her some water. There's only fountains, boss. Find a cup. Holly said, you can tell by the blood splatter all over the papers he was grading. His marker pen is still right next to his hand, by the way. So it happened fast. What are you talking about? So if he let a person walk behind him, he probably knew him. And those trophies, I bet they could be sold for money or drugs. So why are they still there? Does he still have his wallet? Holly, stop, please. Let me do my job. I'll get you home. Wojo! But I still have class. This is more important. But you're going to take a long time, Mom. I know. It's okay. I don't mind staying. Wojo, go get Victor, her driver. He should be outside. Hop to it. As Wojo ran off, Holly's mother looked at her as if she were a stranger. Holly felt a bit stunned herself, like the time she was hit in the face with a volleyball. It was her own fault. She had put her mother in an awkward position, having to protect her and carry out an investigation at the same time. At that moment, 2 police officers walked up, holding a student by the arms. Lieutenant, we got a live one, said one of the officers. His name was Yamana, married last year, baby on the way. The student was squirming. They were holding him tightly, but he didn't hang his head in shame. His head was up. Neanderthals, the boy said. It was Xander Herrera, the tall, grunting boy from her English, math, and social studies classes, the heavyset one with the thick glasses and the bad skin. Officer Yamana held up a box cutter using 2 fingers and a bloody handkerchief. He was tossing this into the garbage can. Xander looked scared. She noticed for the first time that he had braces. She looked down and saw his hands. They were stained with blood. She didn't know why she had to say it, but she did. The words came out of her mouth before she could think again. That's him, Mom. He did it. He's your killer. So this is the beginning of the investigation. So we meet Holly. The book is actually alternating points of view. Holly is in one chapter, and then we actually get to be inside Xander's head. Xander is Holly's main rival in school, even though Holly doesn't see it that way. Holly just wants to make friends with everybody. But Xander is sort of like Ignatius Riley from the Confederacy of Dunces, except he happens to be a Puerto Rican teenager in 1979, but very Ignatius. So I'm going to read just briefly from Xander's perspective, this scene and moving forward a little bit. Okay. Chapter 16. Xander didn't understand. Why was he being manhandled? At first, he thought the police officer was trying to be helpful, unlikely as this sounded, thinking Xander had cut himself. But then he grabbed Xander's arm with a hand whose strength made Xander wonder if the man were bionic. Then another officer showed up out of nowhere, also possibly bionic, and Xander was picked up in the air and taken into what looked like a teacher's office. Standing in the door was the principal and that caveman in loafers, head of security, Mr. Licata. And Holly Hernandez. What in the world was she doing there? She was pointing at him. That was rude. It took him a second to register what she was saying. Did what? Killed whom? It took him another few seconds to realize there was someone in the office slumped over at the desk, a body A dead body. Is that Mr. Friedman? Xander said. Great Caesar's ghost. Is he dead? His voice was pitching high again. Was puberty suddenly regressing? Like you didn't know, Mr. Licata said. Xander felt them all staring at him. Then he understood. They thought he had killed Mr. Friedman, the peripatetic social studies teacher. There was blood all over the desk. A real corpse, a genuine dead body. Xander was not reacting the way he would have liked. He would have liked not to be struggling to withhold tears. He would have liked not to be breathing in sharp, asthmatic huffs. A woman in a suit stepped up to him and identified herself as Detective Hernandez. She looked like a movie star version of a detective. Xander immediately disliked her because she made him feel like something small and filthy, floating in a toilet under her hawkish gaze. The woman turned to Principal Schnicker and said, "Is there somewhere private we can talk?" The cyborg officers took him by the arms and led him out of the office. As they turned him, Holly took a step towards him. "Xander." "Fie," Xander said. "I hate you." Not caring about the wheeze in his voice, he said, "From the pit of my soul, I hate you." I think that's a good place to stop. Hopefully that will have intrigued people enough about the premise. And if anybody has more questions, they can ask in the chat. All caps in the chat or you're banned. All caps in the chat.
Well, I mean, like the sample that you read, I'm sure like has to entice a lot of people.
I hope so.
I mean, it's a good book. So I mean,
thank you, man.
I'm going to ask you a few questions about it.
So, sure, shoot.
So, sorry about the noise. This is the only place I could do it. But
that's okay, man. I got an air conditioning running in the corner, and I don't know if you can hear that. And then my wife she's working, so she's at the office over there. So we might hear stuff from over there. So this is the world as it is now.
Yeah. So tell us what was the inspiration for it? Like, this is a very specific like time frame and like very specific. So like, what was your inspiration to write it?
It's a sort of a convoluted story. What happened was when I first started writing crime fiction, everybody started coming up to me and saying, "You should write YA. Nobody cares about regular stuff. Write YA. YA is where the money is. YA. My wife said it. You have to write YA." And I had actually written a short story for You Don't Have a Clue, which you mentioned earlier. It's an anthology of YA stuff. And I didn't really read that much YA since I was a young adult. I hadn't read that much. But it was an interesting thing to experiment with. But it wasn't really my thing. But I did, when I did write for that anthology, I came up with these characters. I wrote a short story called Hating Holly Hernandez, and it was all from Xander's perspective. And it was a murder mystery, and it was modern, and I liked it, and I really liked the way the characters came out. And I thought, well, hey, everybody says this is where the money is, so why don't I try that? But at the same time, actually, I wanted to make it more interesting. I didn't want to just do it like a mercenary. I said, look, it would be hard for me to continue to try to write as a modern teenager. I know some modern teenagers. I've got a great nephew who's the same age as Holly. But like it would involve cell phones, play dates, GTA, a lot of stuff that I would have to like almost learn a new language. So I said, well, I was a teenager once. Maybe that would be more interesting, and it would be more of my, in your voices, because it wouldn't be me trying to pretend to be a modern teenager. I thought I would have an easier time and a fun time getting back into my past. So doing that opened up all these plot possibilities. I said, well, if she's 14, both of them, then it's 1979, and 1979 is an exceptional year in culture. So much is going on. You don't remember it because I don't think you existed at that point.
I was not born then.
You were
I
not
was born in the 90s.
Oh, okay.
Which is now considered historical fiction when people write it in YA, which is wild to me. So.
And that just gets better as you get older, that feeling. So 1979, I realized, okay, high school, first year is fascinating, a lot of tension going on, because this is where fiction comes from. This is where the great plots come from. That's stuff going on, and it hooked. I was hooked on the idea that people said that disco dies in 1979. This is the year disco dies. And by the way, for anybody who's worried, even though it's in the title, disco never dies. It is still alive. Disco did not die. It evolved. But there was a famous event where they tried to demolish disco at the Chicago White Sox Stadium. And it had sort of surpassed its pop culture freshness date, but it was still around. So anyway, it gave me so many ideas. So at first it was just to shorten my answer, it was to make money, and then it was actually fascinating and a lot of fun to get into that world.
Yeah, I mean, not many people say that they do it for the money, which is very honest.
This is a job. I think a lot of people don't realize this is a job. Yeah. It's a craft. It's fun. It's art, but it's also, hey, I'd like to get paid at the end of the day.
Yeah. So you actually answered some of my questions, like what in the 70s, but so my question following up from that is actually like, how did you prepare yourself to write a historical YA fiction? Because you're writing YA, you're writing historical fiction, which is its own thing. Yeah. And you're also writing like a mystery thriller kind of like, which is really in right now. Right. So that's a lot to like do research on. So like, how did you even do that?
Well, that's a good question. Let me see this. Let me take it apart. So the 70s and doing the research was the most interesting part. So, okay, I lived through it, but it was a long time ago. And sort of that your same reaction to the 90s being historical is like, according to some definitions, it's not historical unless it was at least 50 years ago. In terms of fiction, but it's historical for the intended market, because this book is a middle grade YA book. For those kids, this is historical. They have never heard of this. And it's one of the reasons that I also picked this era is because, I think they might be interested in doing a little research. So in my doing research, I went back and I tried to remember. I went through my high school yearbook. I went to a Facebook group where there were alumni and chatted with some people. But the biggest things I did was I listened to disco music for hours. It was in the background when I was writing, and I would just listen and listen. When I was growing up, my mom had a lot of old Spanish music on. Trio Los Panchos, Tres Tres, stuff like that, salsa in the background. And my father loved Sinatra. So I had this, that's what I was mostly listening to. My sister loved disco, but it's my sister. So that's her thing. So I didn't care that much about disco then. Yeah. So as going back, I'm listening to Hughes Corporation. I'm listening to Philadelphia stuff. I'm listening to all OJ stuff, Gloria Gaynor, stuff that I was like, was in one ear and out the other when I was a kid. And now I'm like, hey, this stuff isn't bad. It's and you can, and I saw the progress of how disco changes. Disco, what we think of as disco is really starting. You can hear it in records in 1969, 68. It really
actually, it's funny because I was listening to The Age of Aquarius right before the event, which is in 1969. Yeah. And you can hear the influences of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just bubbling up in R&B and funk. And then it really starts crystallizing at about 72. And I think, some people still say the first disco song is Gloria Gaynor, Never Can Say Goodbye. You hear that, you hear all the notes and the arrangement, but you hear the pieces of it all through from the late 60s into the 70s. And that was fascinating to me. And as I did more research, I got more and more, I saw that this wasn't just a silly idea. There was a depth to the idea of why people hated disco. And it had these connotations that frankly were biased, racist prejudice. There was because disco, when it started, was the music of the disenfranchised. It's a music for Latinos back then, for African Americans, for gays. That's what they invented it. It comes from them. It was their music. And then it becomes and it was sort of underground. It was there with it hit some of the pop charts, but it was still sort of, it's called dance music, but the whole dance scene was not the popular scene. Then comes Saturday Night Fever, and that basically commercializes it, and it explodes. And I think that's one of the reasons it became so maligned. People got tired of it really fast. And then you get the Bee Gees, song after song. All the pop stations start changing over to, having disco. And then the thing is, you may not remember this, but there was a whole, you don't remember this, but the rock disco thing that all the kids had to fight with. Like, do you like rock or do you like disco? Because you can't like both. Yeah. And that definitely has undercurrents of ethnicity and race, that this divide. And that, I didn't know about this then, but there was a demolition, and I mentioned in the book, there was a Let's Kill Disco, or the End of Disco, Death of Disco rally at the White Sox Stadium in the summer of '79, where this demolition guy brought a box of disco records and he blew it up in the middle of the field, creating a hole. He actually really blew it up. And the crowd, it was a promotional event for the White Sox. They needed something, and they just figured, hey, people hate disco, let's do something. The stadium had never been more crowded than that. When the guy blew the stuff up, 7,000 people from the seats came in and flooded the field. It was chaos. So that it was like a giant riot, and it was all this tension about disco, something that you would think of as silly dance music. When people right now, disco for years has just been a punchline. Oh, like disco stew, like, hey, disco stew, from The Simpsons. But it was there's an element there of the disenfranchised. This is their music, and they just somebody tried to squash it and make it disappear. But it ended up actually winning in the long run, because rock actually mutates. In the next few, after 1979, rock music starts getting more and more danceable. And, because there was that whole thing, rock, and you go to a rock concert, you go, yeah. You go to a disco concert, you're dancing. But eventually your rock concerts, you start dancing like crazy. Anyway, so did I answer? Yes, I did a lot of research.
Yeah, you did. It's very, very much like it's showing that disco was, like you said, for the disenfranchised, very similarly to around when I was born. And I know this now because I've done research and read about it. Kind of like how the ballroom scene for a lot of queer culture, kind of like was kind of for disenfranchised for brown and black queer people, and then Madonna came out with Vogue, and it became mainstream. It was very different.
That voguing, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, she mainstreamed it. Yeah, and that's in a sense the Bee Gees mainstream disco, but I think you got everybody dancing to it, but you still had this element that did not want it around. Wanted to crush it. So yeah, I think the 90s were a little bit more open eventually about it. I don't think they had any giant explosions of music, but there's still undercurrents of racism and violence that probably happened because of it, and maybe nothing as dramatic as what happened in the White Sox Stadium, though. Yeah,
but so I know you kind of went into it a little bit with your answer, but I found it really assuring that like you were focusing on Latinx kids specifically with this. So like I know a lot of your work in general explores like Latinidad and all of that, but what made you want to focus on two Latino kids? Like just and especially in Brooklyn, because a lot of narratives that I've read are usually take place in Manhattan and like very specific to like Spanish Harlem or like some and more in Washington Heights. So like I found that very interesting. So if you could like speak on that.
Sure. No, good question. So I'm born and raised in Brooklyn. I'm a New Yorican, as they say, a New York Puerto Rican. And some of that has been explored in literature, but not very much. My first book, in Hipster Death Rattle, I wrote about gentrification and a slasher. It's a slasher mystery, but it's also about the cost and the dangers of gentrification is in there. So Brooklyn has always been my center. It's always been my focus. And I know Manhattan is the more popular, the more cinematic place. But I've always, I don't like the fact that Brooklyn has sort of been claimed a lot by the more literary genre and stuff. It's been very, it can be very trendy in the way that it's not been Latinx, you know, it's like they sort of forget that we live here.
Yeah.
So it's important for me to kind of hit that. It's like, yeah, hey, Brooklyn, we're in here. It also, going back to one of the reasons I wrote this is because I grew up in Brooklyn at this time. So it was nice for me to go back to that and to have that as sort of the subtext of what I was writing. And as far as Latinx characters, I sometimes will write non-Latinx characters. I'll just come up with an idea for some horror story or some science fiction thing. It's like, they don't have to be. But you know, it's kind of nice just to see Latinx characters in places we don't expect them. So most of the times I do just, you know, Latinx characters. Like, all right, it doesn't really matter that much, but let's call him Rodriguez because I haven't seen Rodriguez fight a Martian before. So let me do that. And so in this sense, I don't know that it's been done before because Holly is a Nancy Drew type character. It's an archetype. We've seen it before, teen detective, but a Puerto Rican teen detective, I thought that would be really neat. Neat. Yeah. I'm showing my age. It would be really cool, rad, to show a Puerto Rican teenage detective. And that it just creates all these possibilities that make her different. I mean, there's Veronica Mars sort of did the updated, the teen detective and updated. And I said, let me take it back and make her, because I knew I was writing YA. It's like, I'm going to make her innocent. It's a more innocent time. And she's sort of naive. She's got a mother who loves her. Her father's passed away. Her mother loves her, but I made the mother a detective, which was really fun because I was like, oh, she must be dealing with so much sexism at the job in '79. So that just opened up her character. But also I realized if she's a single mom, Holly's not going to have anybody to talk to. So she'll be really worried about having friends. And then I was wondering, like, what is Holly's Latinx identity at this point? There's in the '70s, we were still being told that the narrative should be melting pot. You know what I mean? It was all about Americanizing. So Holly would be fairly Americanized, I thought, and that helped me open up parts of her personality. It's not, it's just sort of hinted at throughout the book. And I wanted what helped with Xander as a counterpoint is like, let me make him a little bit more traditionally Puerto Rican. And a traditional Puerto Rican household with the grandmother's around, his mother is around, though she has problems that are sort of typical of urban living in the '70s. But it's a very strong mother figure and grandmother figure. I mean, and he eats Puerto Rican foods, whereas Holly doesn't. So it just doing these kinds of I haven't read this kind of stuff before. And when you write, you can do the same things other people have done. It's fine. Your book will sell. But as a writer, you just want to make it interesting for yourself. And I'm hoping that it's interesting for other people. And also that Latinx children now, teenagers reading it will be like, oh, hey, this person's kind of like me. And we'll go on to it. So yeah, I mean, it was a lot for me, but also I think that there is room for this kind of protagonist. Also, I mean, in terms of Holly, and Xander is sort of a anti-hero as well. I think that's important. I didn't want to make the book just a girl's book or a boy's book, the way publishers tend to put you into plots. You know,
I can get into that.
Yeah, I don't want to make it like it's this kind of book. It's a girl's book, a boy's book. I was like, that's one of the reasons I did the alternating thing. It's like I want to not make it easily definable.
Yeah.
So I hope that worked as well.
No, I think it did. I mean, I definitely could like see like echoes of like my upbringing in both of them.
Okay.
So like it definitely worked.
Okay, cool.
Especially because actually my next question is tell us a little bit more about Xander and Holly, because they're so different, but they complement each other very well in their narratives, especially because like you said, Holly is very Americanized and like very like sweet and like very different from what you would see for like a girl detective. And then like Xander, like with his like very like large vocabulary, and then like his household is like very like Puerto Rican, which is funny because I felt like I related more to Xander than anything. And I felt kind of like seen, but also like called out by it, because I was like, oh God, like this is like reading this is like reading my own experience.
Good, that's good, that's excellent. I love when that kind of stuff hits home. So yeah, you mean like where does Xander come from, or
like where did you like kind of pull like both of these kind of like characters, because they're very like specific and well done in a way that are like very like three-dimensional and
thank you
specific. So like you had to pull that from somewhere.
Well, I mean, I dare. I mean, everything comes from the self as an author.
Yeah.
So I think there are pieces of you, of most people. They're a little bit, you have like a pie. You have different sections of yourself. There is part of me that was very much like Holly. Naive. I was incredibly naive as a teenager. I was an idiot, basically. I didn't know anything. I was sheltered in one way because I was the baby of the family. My brother and sister were living a different kind of life. They were hanging out. I was somebody who wanted to stay indoors. They were outside. They were going to discos. I was just like, let me stay indoors. I want to read. I want to watch Man from the Lantern. I want to watch my Star Trek.
Very much me.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of Holly. That's Holly in sort of like, but Holly's also interested in a scientific part of the world. She's very much sort of a scientist, and she believes she wants to be a scientist, which is why she's going to this elite high school, because her father was a scientist, and so she's trying to sort of recapture her relationship with her dad in that way. And my father was also. He wasn't dead then, but he was sort of absent. So there's a need to somehow relate to the absent parent.
Yeah.
So that's and I write crime fiction normally. So Hollywood, I thought was a great detective who had. I liked the fact that she was a little the Americanized part of me who was listening to Sinatra. And reading comic books and trying to speak English as best I could, watching PBS. That was Holly. And then Xander is me. It was part of me more as the rebellious part that sort of came out later when I got a little older, when I was like, hey, I'm a Puerto Rican. Like you don't realize it sometimes. I mean, I don't know. When you're really young, sometimes you just think of yourself as you're a kid, and then like later on you start thinking, relating to the world around you. So Xander's a little bit more self-aware in that way, but he's also super crotchety, which is also me. Maybe again more adult me, who's just like, everybody sucks. Why is this line so long? Why are those people? Wasn't anybody wearing a mask?
He's very, very honest. Like he's very like blunt and honest, and like
yeah,
he's
very blunt. He's and that's like Ignatius Riley. He's this guy who's just sort of you can't ignore him And the thing is, he would love to be kind of ignored. He doesn't want to be seen. He's got bad acne. He's got the braces. He knows he's large all the way around. He's well fed. But he knows that people are making fun of him. But he has his internal pride tries to shut everybody out. And he uses his heightened vocabulary as a defense. And he loves playing with language. I hope you can, he does when he describes things, he describes them in a certain way. And he's very well read. And I thought it'd be great because what a great supervillain he would make with Holly. She has her own thing that she's going across. The way she tries to solve a crime, he would solve a crime a different way. But I didn't want to make him another detective. I didn't want to make it rival detectives. I wanted to make him sort of a bad guy in his mind. He's not really. Yeah. He's not really. He doesn't.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I feel like they're kind of the two sides of the same coin, almost. Even though he doesn't consider him, even though he's not really a detective, but they're basically trying to get the same thing, but like in very different ways.
Right. Yeah. He's doing it to beat her. He wants to solve it before she does. And he also he wants to clear his name. She feels bad that she accused him because she was nervous. This is the first time the scene is really weird, and she wants to be helpful to her mom. So it just seemed like, oh, he must have done it. And then she sort of blurts it out, and then she spends the rest of the book trying to make up for that mistake. So there was those two contrasts make great tension. And that's, like I said, that's where the story comes from. They just, once I thought of them two, they really, their voices are really strong, and they write their own dialogue really well. It's really nice when playing with either one of them, because they really they pop really strong for me.
Yeah, they're very distinct voices, and so you can definitely tell. It's like really hard to pull off like two different, like multiple narratives in books, and you can kind of tell sometimes that like the author is having trouble because the voice sounds the same, but like this is very like you can tell like Holly is Holly and like Xander is Xander.
Cool, thank
you. So what were your favorite parts to write? Because I know like you pulled stuff out of like from your so
I pulled
both of them, but like I know this is not really a spoiler, but like you wrote your own lyrics for like some of the stuff in the back.
Yeah. Actually, no, that's a good point. I have to mention that. So there's a character, Xander. Holly is basically alone for a lot of the first part because she wants friends. She's trying to make friends, and somewhat awkwardly at first with this other girl who kind of wants to use her, and then she makes friends with these three girls who are sort of like her Charlie's Angels. And they're showing her the world that she hasn't seen before. They're the ones who curl her hair, show her how to curl her hair. But with Xander, he doesn't want anybody to be his friend. But this other kid kind of attaches himself to Xander, and his name is Daniel. And this was something. It's funny about Daniel. So Daniel, when I first conceived him, and he was a lot of fun to write. He only spoke in song lyrics. In real world song lyrics. So he kept saying, like, if he said something to you, it would be a line from Elton John, but it would make sense in the context of what he was saying. Like it actually made sense. It was just like, did you just quote Elton John? But it's still like if he's asking for the pencil, but he's actually still saying an Elton John lyric. And then I realized if I did that, I may have to pay for all those. For all the lyrics. And it's like, this could be a problem because he talks a lot. So he's throughout the book. So I said, let me make up my own lyrics because this might be fun. And so I made lyrics and I signed them to real people. So it's like, I forget who I did. B-52s, for example, who had their first album, I think in 77, 78. So they have the zombie song. It's a surfer zombie. And the thing is, it was great writing those lyrics. So once I could, I kind of wrote them both at the same time. It's like, what does Daniel need to say? And so I wrote it as, okay, could be a cool song, and, kind of at the same time. So I wrote a song. So he says 2 or 3 lines from a song, and Xander has no idea what he's talking about. Later on, when Holly meets him, Holly gets it like that because Holly loves it so much.
Yeah, she really loves music.
Like,
yeah.
Oh, you know this. That's this person. But I realized writing all those lyrics that people have never heard before, they would be really confused. So that's why we have the appendix with all the full songs in the back. So yeah. I hope people enjoy exploring. Like they'll see Daniel, and I think after a while you get the fact that he's not quite talking normally. And then in the introduction, at the beginning of the book, it shows appendices. So I hope people go, what the heck is that? And they'll see and like, oh, that's what Daniel's saying. So it's a lot of fun to come up with Daniel's character I've always wanted to write a character who speaks only in song lyrics. And I suppose if they ever make a Holly movie, we'll be able to spend the money and get real song lyrics, But that was a lot of fun to put together, and I enjoyed adding that layer of a puzzle for readers, so that there's not just the main mystery going on, but like what's going on with Xander's real life, what's happening with Holly's dad, what's the situation with the mother, but also what is this kid saying? Who is this kid? So yeah, that was a lot of fun to write. Also, the disco scenes.
Yeah.
I had been to some discos when I think I was 16, 17 when I finally went to the Garage or Bond's Disco. Bond. This is way before your time. This is 82, 81, 82. And it was fascinating to me, the smoke, the thickness of the smoke, the sweat, the cost of the drinks. But everybody was having that I seen an incredible amount of joy and energy in the room, and I wanted Holly to experience that. She's just, when she sees the disco, she's fascinated by all this positive energy. When Xander sees the disco, he's like, so many people. It's so crowded.
That's how I react. I'm like, there's so many people here.
Yeah, there's too many people.
So Stephanie actually has a question that is similar to the one I was going to actually ask. So what stood out most for you writing YA versus adult? Was there something you had to pull back on it or did it allow you to explore new avenues, or maybe both?
Oh, that's a good question.
I was going to ask the same thing, because you've written a lot of adult, and I know you've written the short story for YA, if I'm not mistaken. So
right. Yeah,
those are very two different.
Yeah, it's a different headspace. When I wrote that YA short story years ago, the editor gave me a couple of rules. You can have cursing, but don't overdo it. But no F word. And you can have, you can suggest romance, but don't have full sex. But you can kill anybody you want, and you can get as So I mean, that's part of the dichotomy of the certainly, I think, of our U.S. culture. We can kids can see brains splattered all over the place, but they can't see nipples. None of that. But so I had to, in my crime fiction, I'm pretty free with what I write. I mean, I don't put a lot of curse words. I don't have gratuitous sex scenes, but I know I can, and I'll have suggestions of it. I'll have jokes that are not appropriate for those who are younger. That's the other. I would people if somebody's buying Holly for a 12-year-old, and that 12-year-old really likes the book, don't get them Hipster Death Rattle for a while. Like wait a couple of years. So it is a different headspace. But once the voices again were so strong, and neither one of them is a big cursor. Xander his curses are all going to be like Marvel Comics references.
I noticed that. I was like, wait, I'm pretty positive these are from like comics.
Yeah, he's every time he curses, it's a comic book reference. And Holly's like, she's straight and narrow. so I didn't really have to worry about that. But I could kill somebody and describe their neck was ripped open if I wanted to. But I ended up at a place that was fairly middle grade, early YA, I think, because I cut back on some stuff because that's just the way it felt right. So writing YA is a different headspace, but once you get into it, it's not like it doesn't feel limiting. You know?
Yeah, I mean, like I read a lot of YA, so
Okay.
it's 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 very interesting to see how different like people take it differently in their approaches of
Yeah.
writing it, especially if I know there's a lot of writers that go from YA to adult or like have gone from adult to YA. So it's always very interesting to see how they kind of like grapple
Okay.
changing their kind of like their mindsets for it because it is very different and you kind of have to go by guidelines and like
Yeah.
what you can write.
Yeah,
So
there is some YA that they will have sexual situations and cursing. There's a whole bunch,
yeah,
it's more open than it used to be. I mean, if I was writing YA
yeah,
in the 50s, it would definitely be very rigid. But it ended up not being where I wanted to go.
yeah. No, and like there's definitely a kind of like hole in a lot of YA where it's like if you're having somebody like a child like a 12-year-old or 13-year-old
Mm.
um, who is like going from middle grade and like wanting to go into YA and it's like such a huge jump
Yeah.
and like kind of like content wise and I kind of feel like this fits in
Okay.
like that hole where it's like okay like here's something that they can read that isn't too like wild for them to like, where you have to have like a sit down and be like okay like here's what's going on in this book
Yeah.
because I've definitely had the conversation with parents when recommending them YA.
Oh wow.
So yeah, I mean like there's definitely a market for it. So um, what was I had my next question and I lost my thought, but
Anybody in a chat? Are we getting any questions?
yeah, we so
All caps in the chat.
from
Yeah.
yeah, there's Paula has a
Hey,
question, which
Paula.
is do you find listening to the music or music of the era you're writing in helps you avoid writer's block?
Yes. Well, I try not to believe in writer's block. By not believing in it, it does not become real. I just think of it again. This goes back to the sort of being mercenary. Think of it as a job. I have to turn out a chapter today. This is my job is to turn out a chapter, and then it kind of helps you get past the fact that I'm an artist and I must be inspired. So I sit down. I mean, but yes, some days are tougher than others. So I will put on. I found a couple of disco channels on YouTube that were fantastic, and lyrics will spin in my head, much like Daniel, or it'll help create a situation it definitely helps me, I guess, open up my mind and think about the era. I ended up also trying to not just disco. I was also listening to a lot of glam rock, which I didn't know anything
Okay.
about when I was younger, and that was fascinating. The Raspberries and I forget her name, Pinky Tuscadero character. All that. That kind of music was also fascinating, and just it helped me understand the era more now than I did then. And in understanding it more, it broadened my perspective of writing about the adults back then and what they were dealing with, and it gave me ideas for dialogue and jargon and slang from those eras, so that I would be listening to disco music, which was like would make me like give me a tremendous amount of energy.
Yeah.
That's the wonderful thing about disco music. You can't sit still. It's really just like you want to. So it was just like it's like more coffee. It's like it was tremendous. It was caffeine of the mind. So it was really good that way. But yes, Paula definitely helped me move forward when writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I find it like a lot of people use music to kind of get them in the headspace
Yeah.
of what they're writing. Especially, I'm nowhere near being an author yet.
Oh, okay.
But I'm writing, so like I kind of have like a playlist of what I kind of have in mind of what I want
Are you
to
writing
write
YA
about.
stuff?
Yeah, I am. It's a paranormal horror
Oh, excellent.
novel. So that's all I will say for now.
Okay, okay. Well, I
Yeah.
look forward to reading it when it comes out. If you
Well,
need
thank you.
help, well, we'll off chat. Off chat.
Yeah. I'll, but yeah, so I guess like the next question is like, what are you working on next? Is there like a sequel to Holly in the
We'll
future?
see, let's see how it does.
Yeah.
Because it's up, publisher kind of thing. You can't just.
Yeah.
I mean, I could publish it by myself, but let's see how it does. I do have ideas. My idea was one book for each year of high school. So she's a sophomore here because she's coming in from 9th grade into 10th grade. So this junior year and then senior year, and I know exactly what I want the last scene of the senior year book to be. And I know exactly how to lead up to it, and but we'll see. A lot of it is about demand. If the book is liked but sort of disappears, then maybe I should move on to something else. So let us see. Other than that, I do have a book coming out in November from Down and Out Books. It is a book of short stories, again mostly for adults, but hey. If kids are experimental, it's there's a lot of curse words, but it's a book of noir stories. It's called Noir Eurekan. So it's a play of Eurekan with noir.
Yeah.
It sounds funny to me, but I hope people like it. That'll be coming out. That'll be coming
People
out.
love friends. So
yeah. So and it's all Latinx characters in bad situations. I mean, that's what noir is. Noir is people who just really make bad decisions. And it gets worse and worse. So it's not necessarily a good like a happy book. It's pretty dark. But so that'll be out but there's a market for that. So that'll be out in November.
So my last question before we get to, because there's a few questions in the chat. If not necessarily for Holly or Xander, but if you do have an idea of what you can say, but if they were to make a film, Holly, who would you cast for the adults, or for Holly and Xander? If you have like,
Holly and Xander, Holly and Xander have to be unknowns.
Yeah,
they got to be.
That's what I figured.
They would be kids now. Whoever's Holly and Xander are.
Yeah.
But the mother, I've always liked Rachel Ticotin, or Ticotin. You know her from. She was she was in the Total Recall, the Schwarzenegger version. Remember her? Yeah. She played Melina.
Yes.
Yeah. So her great for the mom. And Holly's mom, I have. Maybe Rosie Perez would be good for the mom. But
that's funny because I was thinking of like her.
Yeah, but she would have to like it's not a glamorous role. Until the thing is like the way I imagine the mom is just like she's like bedraggled until she gets ready to go to the disco, and then like because that's when his mom comes alive. So I think that would be a wonderful transformation. So those two, and the other ones don't really matter. I mean, the teacher just dies right away. The favorite teacher. But it really be great. I don't. Mr. Bacci, the English teacher, would be an important role to cast. I haven't quite thought about that yet, but I would love to see two unknowns really bite into as Holly and Xander. I think it'd be great.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a really great decision. Yeah. So let's hope it actually gets to that point. Sophia, because I know this person.
Oh, hi, Sophia.
What is your favorite thing about writing YA?
About writing YA, listen, a lot of things about writing that appeal to me are the fact that you get to be not yourself for a little while, even though, I mean, it's all exploring some inner part of your head. you are transported. And for a while, it's for YA, since I'm a little bit on in years to become to think about a little bit over the hill to get into the mindset. It's actually slightly sentimental, and as you get older, you'll see also when you do that, it's slightly melancholy. Is it melancholy exploration? And so that gives me actually really good creative inspiration. And I really like also, besides the stuff for me, is writing for my beyond my usual audience. I mean, I don't claim to have a lot of fans. Maybe like 2 or 3 by now, but I think most of my fans are, they're older and everything. And it's nice to appeal to other people and just like broaden and maybe I don't know, influence them in some way, saying, hey, this is high school. To be really smart in high school is not so bad. It's okay. There's a lot of anti-intellectual sentiment in our country, and I think I really enjoyed writing about very smart teenagers who have no problem being very smart, and it's okay. And because I remember I was a nerdy kid, and sometimes people would just call you many names that I won't repeat that hurt when you're smart. So I hope that these characters are unabashedly intelligent. So I don't know. It helped me, and I hope it helps somebody who reads it.
I think it will. I think I feel like it's authentic, and like I said, a lot of people will appeal to it in some way. But the next question actually is a good one.
Okay.
A really good one.
Nice.
Music seems to play a huge part in the writing process. What would Xander's favorite song be, and Holly's?
Holly's favorite song is, well, actually, she has a thing for John Denver that it just happened as I was writing. She loves John Denver and Karen and the Carpenters. So she's coming from that space, but I think she ended up really liking There But For the Grace of God by Machine. You know that song?
I know of it.
I'm not going to sing it, but it's a really wonderful song. And Xander's is probably listen to it afterwards. It's a really good song. It's one of the best songs. Xander's is probably Supernature by Cerrone. Do you know much disco? Okay, let me just for those who don't. So There Before the Grace of God is basically one of those early in the 80s. You get a lot of music that was very socially conscious. There Before the Grace of God is socially conscious disco. It's a really wonderful song that tells a story. Supernature is basically a science fiction movie in a disco song with animals taking over the world. Totally would appeal to Xander. So that's their three songs. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
There should be yeah.
No, continue.
No, there should be like a soundtrack or an album that comes with the book.
Usually, some people include like a track list of like songs, but I don't know the legality of that.
Right? Yeah, that's
kind of like murky.
Yeah.
You could always just post it online somewhere.
Right. On Twitter, when I was desperately trying to promote this, I did a song a day for like 25 days. And that was, to me, the soundtrack. All those songs were ones that were in my head as I wrote the book. I'll put it on. I can put it on my website. This is the soundtrack, the Holly soundtrack. And I'll link to all the videos online so people can listen to it.
All right, so this is actually the end of of the event. But before we go, thank you so much, Richie, for doing this, and thank you for everyone for joining in and listening to our discussion of Holly Hernandez and the Death of Disco.
You can and order in.
Yeah, you can order below on astoriabookshop.com. A caveat to that, if you need it shipped to you, right now we're only doing curbside pickup, but if you do email us at info@astoriabookshop.com, just let us know that you're purchasing the book and you need it shipped to you, and we'll adjust it to add shipping onto it. And yeah, that's it. It might take a little bit because of COVID and just general shipping, but it will get to you.
Yes, and
eventually.
there was a delay in the printing, but the book is printed and it's being shipped. So if you order it, you should get it within the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, so, but thank you again for joining us, and we hope you
Thanks,
join us
everybody.
for our next event. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you, Christian.
Of course.
Take care, man.